Okay, the red light is on. That means it's running.
Do you want him to he's just going to introduce us.
Are you going to start? Oh, you are? Okay. Okay, so welcome to today's session. It's called Shop Smart for E-Rate Services and Equipment, and I have to say that because they're filming this and they wanted it at the start of the film. So I don't know about you guys, but I was real pessimistic about the changes to E-Rate here a couple years ago, but for at least our district, they turned out to be very beneficial for us. So I think part of the way we were able to make that beneficial was consulting with these folks. And the folks on our panel today are Amy McLaughlin, who works for ODE, and Sabrina Carson, who I think started E-Rate, because I've been talking to her since the first time I applied for E-Rate funding, and she works for WAM ESD as well as a consultant for Oregon Department of Education. And for moral support, we have Susie Stringfield in the back of the room. So I'm going to turn it over to these guys and let them get started.
Thanks, Tom. Okay, so today we want to talk about not like just basics of E-Rate, because I'm pretty sure most of you in the room have the basics of E-Rate. Anybody here have experience with E-Rate? Yeah, okay, so we're not going to start at the very beginning of these are the basics, but what we are going to talk about is some of the timeline, just an overview of the timeline for the process, the kinds of products that are eligible, because there are some you might not have thought about before, and there's been some changes in what products are eligible, and then some really good strategies for ways to get more bids on your RFPs, more response from vendors, and more consistent response that will help, I hope, help drive you to be able to actually get competitive bids, because I know some folks have a real hard time getting responses, and some new funding opportunities that we hope that folks will be looking at leveraging through the next few years in order to not only bring infrastructure to your schools, but then expand the infrastructure throughout your schools. So that's just an overview of where we're going to go, and I'm handing it off.
Thanks. Okay, so the first thing I thought I would do is just start with a very, very high-level overview of the timeline and process, because I know some of you probably know what E-Rate is, you know what it does, but you may not understand the different phases of the process. And so I'm going to try and get through this very, very quickly. The way I usually do things when I have these conversations is I like to kind of let people, have questions throughout, right, a little bit. And that, because sometimes you get a good thought that's really important, and when you say it, it makes sure that I talk about it when it's relevant. So if there's something I'm saying that doesn't make sense, just kind of jump on out there and say, hey, real quick, what about this? But the program itself was created by the FCC back in 1998, and it is currently administered by the Universal Service Administrative Company, which is a quasi-governmental agency that is responsible for all 4 of the universal service programs, including E-Rate. And the program provides different types of funding for different types of services. So we have Category 1, which is your internet access and voice for a limited time. Voice is getting phased out. Today we're just going to focus on internet access. And then Category 2 is the internal equipment, switches and routers and cabling and things like that, that help you make good use of the bandwidth that you're receiving. So recent development was a big increase in the funding cap. It's now at $3.9 billion per year. So that it used to be like 2.3 something, and it was not always very helpful. And for those of you who don't know, the discount rate that your district receives is a product of your percentage of eligibility for free and reduced lunch and your urban-rural status according to the census. So that's how we determine how much extra money you get. Okay. Category 1 applications, you file for whatever it costs. If it's eligible and if it costs, $100,000, you apply for that amount, and if you're, generally speaking, if there's money in the fund still and there is no problems with your application, you're going to get funded. Category 2 is a little different. It has a set budget by school, and that budget is a product of student membership and your discount rate, which we'll go over in a little more detail here pretty soon. There are specific forms, processes, different kinds of rules and guidelines and things, best practices to have a successful application. And some of them are very strict, particularly with competitive bidding. And a mistake there can foul the whole application. And so that's something to be really mindful of. And we do talk about some of these things in here further down the road. Okay, so the Form 470 is the solicitation instrument, I guess. It acts sort of like an RFP, although you can also have an RFP with it. You release it and it stays online for 28 days, and at least 28 days. And then during that time, service providers are providing you bids. You score those bids based on a bid matrix, and there are rules about how you can score these. So, again, I won't go into the details, but always something to do a lot of research on if you're doing it for the first time. Another thing is they do not require RFPs. Like I said, the 470 kind of acts like an RFP, but they also state that if your local procurement rules require you to have an RFP, like say it's a large dollar amount and it triggers an RFP requirement, then you are actually required to file an RFP at that point. Another thing I want to point out is that USAC uses the term RFP to basically cover any supporting documentation. So even if your district doesn't, consider a form an RFP, USAC will. If it's just a list of criteria, points, or locations, those are things that they will consider an RFP. So just keep that in mind. So let's see. I jumped around a little bit, but the scoring matrix I talked about a little bit. The cost of eligible services is the most important factor, so that has to be the most heavily weighted. Let's see. The new rules provide, hang on one second. Sorry. That's in an odd place. Sorry about that. So there are some new funding available, including special construction and amortization of special construction costs and things like that. And those have some special requirements for the bid selection process. And we're going to talk about those in more detail later on. That's some of what I want to share with you today is how the best practice for that. You can use multi-year contracts or single-year contracts. You can still, for Category 1, month-to-month services are allowed. Category 2 always requires a contract for equipment and things like that. So it's something to keep in mind. Oh, another thing to mention is that filing a Form 470 does not require you to actually complete the purchase. If you're filing a Form 470, you get bids, and then you realize, oh no, we don't have the budget for that, then, you have the option of abandoning the project and saving that money for another year or another project. So the Form 471 is the document that requests funding from the program, and you go through your bid selection process, you execute all your contracts, you make all of your necessary arrangements to start service, and then you apply for those dollars, based on your discount rate, how much the services are going to cost, and you let USAC know basically what you're going to do, who you're going to buy it from, what you're going to buy, and how much it's supposed to cost. And hopefully you have all of that data provided to you by the service provider beforehand. It's possible for a 471 to include lots of funding requests. Sometimes they are for the same vendor but for different services. Sometimes they are, there's multiple ways that these can be put together, and it's possible that, oh, hi. Okay.
Getting audio from your computer.
Oh, all right.
And if you want for the room.
Okay. Can they hear me okay? Yeah. Awesome. All right. anyway, I was talking about FRNs. There's lots of little miniature funding requests inside of one 471 is basically what I'm getting at. All right. So there's a filing deadline every year. It changes from year to year. Normally it ends usually sometime in March. This year it ends significantly later, and there's several reasons for that. Primarily the big changes that were made to the application portal this year. It did not go smoothly for them, or for us for that matter, and so we have some extensions that were created to give applicants and USAC more time to fix the problems. So let's see. I'll tell you the current deadlines. May 26th for schools and districts, and then consortia and libraries have until July 21st. So if you are going to, if you're, I know there's multiple states here. If the state match is something that's an option for you, you should make sure and check that on your Form 471 and indicate, where the funds are coming from and all of that. And if you think it's a possibility, definitely check the box anyway, right? Because there's no penalty for checking the box. And if you find later that nothing comes of it, there's not a state match available, then you simply tell the PIA reviewer that, we're not doing state match anymore. And everything proceeds as normal. There's no penalty in leaving that option open. The opposite is not true. If you file and then find out that there's a state match and it's past the deadline where you can't file a new form, then you're stuck. You won't be able to use that state match. So if you get an inkling that that's available in your state, then check that box and fill in those fields. Yes, ma'am. Okay, yeah. Okay, yeah. Thank you. Okay. And also another thing, filing a Form 470, filing a 471, just like the Form 470, does not obligate you to complete the purchase. My recommended best practice is that anytime you negotiate a contract, especially related to E-rate, that you should have an exit clause in case of funding failure or other means. It's very easy to get in the habit of thinking that E-rate funding is a guarantee, but it isn't. There are things that happen, and sometimes they happen, you're doing your application process and things are happening in your business office that you don't know about, and all of a sudden your procurement got fouled, or they changed service providers without talking to you first, and things happen that, can cause funding failure. So always give yourself an out. And I think that that's a best practice for any type of application. But if you find later that your funding fails, you can abandon a Form 471 and not receive that E-rate funding, or you can actually abandon individual FRNs in a 471. Again, so as long as you haven't collected money, you can cancel that at any time, and the funding that may have been committed to you gets returned to the pot. Okay. So, some examples of Category 1 services that are available for funding or discount. New this year is dark fiber, which is very exciting because there's some mechanisms around that for special construction. So for your remote rural districts, there is additional funding that's available to you that and it's under Category 1. There's no limit to how large remember I said at the beginning that Category 1 applications are as big as they are. You apply for what you need, and assuming that the funding's available, that's what you can be funded. It doesn't have a cap like Category 2. But what happened before was that the special construction was that was beyond your DMARC was not covered. And so it caused a lot of problems. So that is new this year, and it's something we're going to talk about in more detail later. But this is just some information about the different types of internet access services. If you're in an area where you can't get fiber and special construction is not reasonable for you at that point, there's lots of other services that you can get discounted. And then for category 2, this is the internal hardware that makes it possible for you to make the best use of that broadband that you're getting those discounts for. And so there's a lot of different types of hardware and cabling, especially. I know I've seen a lot of 470s for cabling because, you know, people finally have that opportunity to expand their infrastructure. And especially if you're building any new schools, right, or renovating older schools, or, you know, doing any kind of, you know, breaking down walls and stuff, always think in the back of your mind about that cabling availability, because that's a great time to get it done. But you got to time it right. As soon as you get the idea that that might happen, raise the flag with your leadership and go, don't forget about E-rate, because there could be money there for you. Does anybody have any questions so far? I know I'm going through this part kind of fast, but I just don't want to bore you with stuff you already know. We good? Okay. So one of our big things that we're hearing about, like Amy mentioned, is that we, especially with Category 2, applicants are not getting bids. They're not getting very many, right? They don't know that they're getting the best pricing. And we are finding that for Category 2 equipment, there's usually places to choose from. I mean, you know, there's some good hardware vendors out there that have been in the program for a long time. And then if you don't have a local vendor that contacts you, you can always call a place like, you know, CDWG or OETC and ask for quotes from them. And they are E-rate eligible vendors. So if you're in a pickle, you know, you have them to fall back on and just make sure you're comparing, you know, getting the best price. But for cabling, that's a very specific kind of, you know, service. And in Oregon, at least, you have to have a low voltage electrician's license to install Ethernet cable. And so you know, that electricians are not looking at E-rate. You know, they're not looking at, you know, the funding mechanism. They might even not even be looking at ORPN, right? I mean, there's a few. But the thing is that, okay.
I'm on the next one.
Oh, okay. So, okay.
Just waiting for that transition.
Okay. So we're working on increasing the visibility of that, and we are, you know, we hope that you'll let us know if you continue to have problems getting bids. Let's see. Oh, that's a good question. And real quickly, if they don't, they can bid and you can award. They just have to get that spin before they can be paid and funded. Okay? So, yeah. I've basically covered all of this. So, go ahead.
Okay. Oh, I forgot about that. Yeah. So one of the things we looked at, so there have been conversations that Sabrina and I have been having. Some specific ones I actually remember from ACPE for the last 2 years, both with providers and vendors around some of the challenges. Like, I would ask them, so why don't you guys not bid on people's equipment or cabling or whatever? And one of the answers we got a lot was, well, there are a couple answers. One is they didn't understand what they were asking for. 2 is they didn't have a walkthrough. So just so you know, cabling vendors want to be able to walk through and see your building because they don't want to like promise the world and then find out that they can't cable right for you or it's going to be challenging. And 3 is they couldn't find the RFPs. And one of the reasons being is that there are lots of school districts. And so then vendors and providers kind of have to look at every single district to find that RFP out there. So what if you could reach a broader audience for your RFP and your Form 470, identify a list of providers or possible providers and target them with an announcement that says, hey, we're putting this out here, please respond. Provide your RFP in a central location where it's going to be watched by providers who are going out to see what business is available, and instruct vendors on how to become an E-rate service provider. So wouldn't it be great if you could do that easily and online? And you actually can. And we invited Adam and Kelly from the Department of Administrative Services to come talk today. Unfortunately, their one big event of the year is today. And so they're down at the Oregon Convention Center. So in lieu of Adam and Kelly in person, we have Adam, digital Adam, virtual Adam. Technology is our friend. And to talk about the ORCAP program. But I'm going to get a little intro to the ORCAP program. So ORCAP is a program that's available to school districts in Oregon. It's also available to local governments, counties, cities, all that. There's one difference. The Department of Administrative Services charges local governments to use ORCAP as a service. And they give it away to districts for free. Free, free, free. We'll come back to that point in a minute, but let me just say it one more time. They give it away to districts for free. So, with that introduction, I'm going to let Adam talk about what the ORCAP program is, and then what ORPEN is. And ORPEN is the web, basically the web portal through which you use the ORCAP program to reach vendors. And I'm going to... Oh, are you kidding me? Or maybe not. I may just tell you myself, because that was different. Oh, here we go. Whew. Technical challenge. I did test this before. So let's see if...
I think it opened 2 windows.
Are you... Okay.
There we go.
Okay, second time's a charm here. So, is there anything I have to press to make sound happen? Oh, but I probably need to turn sound up on my machine. Okay, technical challenge. I can't pause Adam, so I will reload him in a moment.
Test, 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 test. Switch to
Okay. Here we go. Yes. Up. Sorry. Just a moment. Why is that not? Oh, because I have to exit out of present. There we go. One last time. Uh-oh. Still don't have sound. Yeah, it's all the way up.
I'm so glad you're here.
That's why I stayed.
Oh, it's a cord problem. I think you might have a key playing twice.
It's coming out somewhere twice.
Is it playing twice?
It's, oh, you mean, oh, that would explain it. Okay. There we go. Let me try that again and get rid of one of those.
It is in stereo.
There we go.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Hovey. I'm with Downtown Services. We're here to talk to you a little bit about the Global Partner Program. And you can look at my face thanks to Amy Walton, and she said that we should probably do a video. So I'm going to blame that on her. But I wanted to introduce you to myself. Also, there's another team member, Kelly Stevens-Mahler. She is actually not going to be in this video. She is presenting right now. But I wanted to make sure that she is here to hear it. So here's Kelly. Hi, Kelly. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk to you a little bit about ORPEN and the Oregon Cooperative Program and why that can be a real benefit. So I'm going to keep this awkward and keep my video up here in the right-hand corner. So we'll have that here for you just in case you really want to see me talk to you. And I'll be very intentional. So starting off with the presentation, we're going to talk a little bit about what is the Oregon Cooperative Program. Well, the Oregon Cooperative Program is set up so that units of local government, like schools, and even charter schools, ESBs, any of those can participate in the program that gives you access to over 340 state agreements. So our office contracts with with vendors in the local community, putting out solicitations. Our state agencies have to use those, and then it's an option to do it. That gives you unlimited access to Orphan, which I'll show you what Orphan is here in a little bit. And it also provides training opportunities, both free and ones that you have to pay for, to get, certification. It opens up, state of Washington contracts. There are a lot of them that ORCAP members are able to purchase off of, so that's another resource. And then also the Oregon Cooperative Agreement, which is our listserv that provides you updated information on our contracts, training events, just all sorts of gas surplus. So moving on, the first thing that we want to go over is some statewide price agreements that might actually be of service to you. Some of the schools are using CDWG, which we get really good rates from. For your IT hardware purchases, works a lot like Amazon.com. We have Dell for hardware and software as well. We have office supplies contracts with all these vendors, Staples, Office Max, for office solutions. Free shipping, really great value there. Janitorial, language and transcription services. We do have grocery contracts, maybe 20 vendors on that price agreement. Vehicles are a huge saver for the state of Oregon. And then we also have tires, lawn and garden, this goes on. So it's just something that you really want to check out and take advantage of. All these things are going to save you time and money. So what is Orphan? So Orphan is our website that we go to where it is the acronym itself is Oregon Repository Procurement Information Network. But it's where you're going to find our price agreements, and it's also a centralized location for agencies to post opportunities and then for the vendors to find those opportunities. So it allows agencies like schools to post bidding opportunities for the vendor community. And it's also a place to research for procurement documents for not, which I'm going to show you. So let's go ahead and move on and let's demo Orphan. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop sharing the presentation. And by the way, I'm using the Adobe Connect right now, and Adobe Connect is on price agreement. So you would have access to get this on our price agreement. And many other things that you can use for, so it's a really great product. So if we're looking at, I'm logged into Orphan, this is what the site looks like. There are going to be 3 things that I want to show you today really quickly. You won't have to remember these things. You're going to contact me and I'll walk you through them again at another time. But first, statewide contract search. This is how we find our price agreements. So we're going to search by keyword. We're going to look up tire. And the first 4 agreements that come up are our tire vendors. So Les Schwab, Bridgestone, Michelin, Goodyear. And we're going to select one of those. And what many people want Orphan to be is a way to check pricing against each other companies and then make your decision for who you're going to buy from. In fact, we actually have 25 analysts doing 340 price agreements and multiple vendors. Pricing fluctuates on a daily basis, so we just can't keep up with that. So what it is a portal for you to find contact information for Debbie Freer at Goodyear, and then you're going to contact Debbie and you're going to say, we're an Oregon Cooperative member, provide your member number, and then they're going to give you the state of Oregon pricing, whether that's an online portal to their website, whether they just send you a spreadsheet, whether they just go over the phone specifically on an item that you're looking for. That's up to them and you, but really this is how we're able to find out pricing for the things that we buy. Now sometimes, second of all, we have our contact administrator. So David Reynolds is the person that you call at our office if you have issues with the contractor or with the vendor, or you just have questions about the contract itself. So that's your contact there. And you can always contact Elliot and myself. And then attachments exist is a section where if there is pricing or the discounted rate, you can find it in here. There's also going to be the PA itself, so you can see what the agreement looks like. And then a lot of times there'll be a buyer's guide. This one does not have a buyer's guide, but the buyer's guide walks you through how to actually utilize the agreement. So that, in a nutshell, is kind of how you use it for finding price agreements. Now, once you get a login to Orphan, we can do a one-on-one on the phone and I can go into more detail on this, but I just wanted you to get an idea. You can also search by commodity, by the organization, lots of other things here. But the next thing that I wanted to show you is posting notices. I'm not gonna walk you through actually posting a notice, it's pretty easy. That's something that we would do over the phone as well, or on a webinar. But I'm gonna show you a list of the organizations that are currently posting in Oracle. So as you can see, there's many here, and I'm gonna pull up the city of Albany's, just as an example. So the city of Albany actually does not put all their postings on here. What they do is they refer suppliers to their website and say, here's where we upload all our opportunities. And so we're going to click on that link right there for their opportunity. And it has contact information. There you'll see the description of here, if you want to look at our opportunities, click on this link. What I'm going to show you really cool, think about you're putting up a E-rate document or some other document. You just issued it. We're about 3 or 4 days into it, and you're curious to see if anybody's even showing interest in it. Well, over here under View Data, we have a Supplier Activity log, and in that Supplier Activity log, it shows you the suppliers that have expressed interest. So you can see when and who is actually showing interest in your document. And if you really want to know if they're really, really interested, there's a section down here that says suppliers that have downloaded documents. Now, obviously, City of Albany doesn't have any downloaded documents, so that's not an option. But many of these would have already downloaded the documents, which means they really have the intent of putting in a response to your opportunity. So that's the second thing that I want to show you. The third thing is really powerful as well. Under the opportunity section, we have an advanced search, and we're going to look at flows. We're going to look at E-rate. And then we're going to go down here and select a date in the past, let's say 2011, and select the day there, and then we're going to search. What this is going to do is we're going to actually see any solicitations that have to do with E-rate in the past 5 years. And right here, it may be that Amy's already shown you this particular document, but if not, here it is. It's Richmond School District just recently went out for E-rate, and they used the Oracle system. Yeah, here it was then. Okay, and so you see here contact information for Wade Smith, and if I was doing the document, I may even contact Wade Smith and say, hi Wade, I've looked at your solicitation, saw you guys did it, how did it go? Was there anything that you could have done that you now would see that you could have done better? Just to bounce some ideas off them, that's really powerful. And then the attachments exist file, we have their actual RFP, the PDF file. So you can do a lot with a PDF or a Word document. You might even be able to use some of the language that they use if you find it to be valuable. So that could be a huge time saver and a huge resource. So those are the 3 things that I kind of wanted to go over in terms of Oracle. And then also we have it on the contract list on the splash page. There are contract lists where you can save favorites. So if you use a contract over and over again, you can put it right there. There's also a section where any documents that you have started, it's a quick link to, and then also in the open opportunities, if you have something open that is out on the street and waiting to close, it'll be here as well. So pretty user friendly for the most part. If you have any issue with it, we are always here for it. So now we're going to go ahead and go back to the presentation. So bear with me for just a minute. And the next step would be, how do I get signed up? So we do have about 120 of the 197-ish schools in the state of Oregon. So there are many that aren't utilizing the program, and there are many that are members that aren't utilizing the program. So if you're wondering if your school is or is not, you can check here at the link that I have listed, and I'll provide this presentation to Amy so that she has it. If you're not a member, what can you do? Well, you're going to contact Ellie or myself at this email address that we've listed. And in the chat, I've also listed more contact information for us if you'd like to jot down. But this email is a joint email inbox between me and Kelly, and we'll make sure to get you the intergovernmental agreement, because it's a 9-page agreement. There's only about 3 or 4 pages you actually put the information on, and it's really simple. It probably takes 15 minutes. Everything can be sent to us electronically. So what's it going to cost us to join? Well, you can imagine how good the resources are. It's going to be kind of expensive, right? So I wanted to actually give you 3 slides, manual slides, that would help you understand the cost that's associated with it. So here's the first one. I call him Mr. Zero. And he's really happy because the price for it is actually 0. So if you're a numerical person, this kind of chart's for you. If you're more of a word person, that you kind of need to see it spelled out, this is another way to do it. So that'd be zilch is the word I chose to represent that. And then maybe, since you're in the education industry, you probably want some sort of math equation. So I've got another chart that says, your school plus the Oregon Cooperative Program is free. So anyway, I hope that I've clarified that there is actually no risk to you, it's just benefit. So we made a decision back in 2013 to make sure that all the education organizations do not pay for the Oregon Cooperative Program. So it is a must that you are in the program and utilizing it. It can really save you a lot of time and money. So definitely feel free to contact me at any time. Amy's going to probably set up a phone call here at the end to have me available for any questions. But if you don't have any questions and you just want to contact me another time, I will say goodbye and have a really, really good conference. Thanks so much for your time.
Yay, virtual Adam. All right, so just in case, going back. Just in case Adam's 3 slides didn't quite do the word justice, free, super free, so use it. And the other thing that Adam didn't demo for you, but I want you to be aware of, which I think is a fabulous resource, is that there's also a function where you can, take pictures of their contact information, please. There's also a function where you can go in and pull a list, and they can walk you through how to do this. Pull a list of, for example, all the cabling vendors in the state, and then spam them with your RFP. So you can actually shoot it out to every cabling vendor in the state, which means if you have a problem where you can't usually get low voltage cabling people to come to bid on your projects, you can target them all in one central location. And your own personally spam engine. Pretty awesome. So I just wanted to plug that too, because I know Adam didn't have time to really show you the details of that, and it's several multi-steps that kind of broke out of the 3 things, but it's a great function to be able to find out who your vendors are and how you can reach out to them. Not just have them coming to you, but also pushing information out.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to add really quickly is that you notice that in the demonstration that, sometimes you didn't necessarily have an RFP in ORPN, you had documents elsewhere. And you simply put the link to that solicitation in ORPN to get it out there and visible. And I wanted to point out that for those of you where an RFP is not required, but you have supplemental information that's important, and you want to let everybody know there's a 470 out here, here's the number, here's the link, how to view it, and then here's a link to our supporting documentation so that you can see what we need. That's another way to do that. So it's a pretty handy way to get the word out. And some things to remember that I just wanted to remind everybody. E-rate requires that you follow your local procurement process. So like I said earlier, it's up to your district whether you're required to file an RFP or not. But if you are, you must. Okay? And also, for those of you who work for an agency that doesn't have a formalized procurement policy, your fallback is the model rules, the DOJ model rules. And but other than that, districts have local control over how they structure their procurements and whatnot. So just wanted to mention that if you're working for a small district and you're not sure what to do, there's some information about, how if you want to formalize a process. I mentioned before about RFP/supporting documentation meaning the same thing. I also mentioned the new deadlines earlier, but I'll just say again that the E-rate Productivity Center is not functioning at its best, and there are issues going on right now that are preventing some applicants from being able to complete their applications. If you have not started working on your Form 471, I highly recommend that you do that, because despite the what seems like a long time until the deadline, you'll find that you might have challenges that you didn't anticipate. So, all right, let's talk about the good stuff now, the new funding opportunities. The modernization order, among some unpleasant things, added some new funding for specifically implementation of fiber broadband, and for Category 2, networking equipment or internal connections is what they call it. 2015, last year, the funding year last year, they implemented the Category 2 funding mechanism where we had that per school budget, and then you determined your needs and deducted those costs from the individual school budgets. And every viable, valid application for Category 2, they had enough money to fund them all. So if you didn't make any mistakes and you didn't foul your procurement or anything like that, the money is there. And that hasn't happened like in the history of the program, basically. I mean, I think they did once in 2010. They just, for some reason, decided to fund all the Category 2s, but nobody filed really to speak of because people had long given up. But that's not the case anymore, so keep that in mind. I'm going to talk a little bit more about it, but there is money out there to be had. This year, 2016, is the first year that they're implementing the special construction program that they started talking about in the modernization order. And you might be wondering, why did we not get a bunch of training on how to do this before the window, right? I'm sure some of you are like, why are we hearing about this now? And the reason is that they implemented it, sort of, and then they eked out little bits of information, and they still haven't given a lot of formal guidance on how to actually do this. I've pieced together some information from talking to different people at USAC about some, best practices and things, and I'm going to share them with you now for planning for next year. So I'd like to formally apologize on behalf of USAC for not having the information you needed in the time that you actually needed it. Sorry. They would say sorry too if they were here. All right, so let's talk about the best practices. So some things to remember is that if you want to go out to bid for leased dark fiber or self-provisioned dark fiber, that's what they're calling fiber that you own, you have to also accept bids for lit fiber, and then you have to do a total cost of ownership analysis between both types of service. And theoretically, their rationale is to make sure that they're not just buying dark fiber because you want to own it. You're buying it because it's the most cost-effective solution and the best use of their funding. So there's some kind of best practices for the RFP, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. Fiber requires an RFP in this case, and again, that could just be a supporting document, right? It doesn't have to be a full 30-page boilerplate RFP, but it must have some components in it. So that one of the things you have to do is make sure that service providers separate the cost of the special construction. And to clarify, special construction is the cost of the installation beyond your DMARC, right? So Category 2 internal connections, that's within your DMARC. Category 1 special construction is beyond the DMARC, okay? So that special construction cost should be separated out in the quote so that it's easily identified. Yes, ma'am.
Can I jump in with just?
Please.
So one of the things I want to bump back up to the total cost of ownership for just a moment because I had some extensive conversations with the FCC about total cost of ownership, and what you need to know for your total cost of ownership is that they have not set a number of years of limitation on how long you can go for total cost of ownership. So let's be really honest right now. If I do a TCO on dark versus lit fiber for 3 years, guess which one's going to win? But if I have a good business case and plan for going longer, and I do a total cost of ownership for 5 or for 10 years, you may end up with a different result. And they have not defined how long the total cost of ownership analysis has to be for. You only have to do a total cost of ownership. And so they are encouraging people to really examine and not just think, a couple years down the road, because you're just trying to get past the hurdle, but to think about the long-term viability of your schools and supporting your schools.
That's a good reminder. Yeah.
Come from St. Bethesda, we just went through this process.
Yes.
We did our process for subdivision five, where, like you said, we had to have 3 categories of lit and dark and already. We did this for 20 years. From DMARC into the switches, the transceivers, that is, I think the total cost of ownership was less of a timeline for that piece, and we broke that out. So, yeah.
That's a good tip.
Interesting
Yeah.
to be here to kind of hear you guys talk about what we are doing in the process.
Yeah. No, yeah. A just-in-time approach, right? But it was. We didn't think we were going to be in the middle of a funding window when we were here. When ACPEnw was scheduled, we thought the window was going to be closed. So, lots of exciting stuff in the middle of the window. Thank you for that, because I will say that anecdotally, I'm hearing like 7 to 10 years for a TCO is something nice to shoot for. Obviously, you can go.
So useful life of fiber is generally 20 years.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But the useful life of the equipment is connected to it on average.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So it's a little hard to figure out the equation.
And you can
cost of
split it.
Lit keeps going down.
Right.
How do you estimate that even out of 5 years?
Yeah, you just have to take your best guess, but as long as you've done the logic and the demonstration, that's what they're looking for.
It has to be quantifiable. Show your work. That's
like a math problem.
yeah. They will most likely ask you during review. Show us your total cost of ownership analysis, and it just has to make sense.
Yeah, you can always hit us up and ask questions.
Awesome.
We did Cisco chassis for all NDS for our weighted network separately. And then the transceivers, I believe, we're including that into the dark fiber project. So there's different ways to do it. I'm not in this. I come to the networking team, but I'm part of the RFP process. So.
It's great information. Please, thank you for sharing. It's great to have an example to work from. Okay, so let's see. The other thing you need to do on your RFP/supporting document is outline the maintenance, the maintenance specifications, what you're expecting, and get quotes for that as well, because that should also go into your TCO, particularly for self-provision fiber. If you're leasing it, chances are the service provider is going to take care of it for you. But for self-provisioned, that is an additional cost, and they want to know that you are taking it into consideration. So it's a good idea to put that in your RFP and get that pricing either from the vendor that you're purchasing the installation from, or another provider that simply does the maintenance.
And they'll throw high numbers out on that. You do not have to, so like, the one that won the bid had a high number for maintenance, and we didn't have to choose that, so to speak. So, I don't know how to explain that, but.
So, just out of curiosity, how many people responded to your special instruction, and do they already have spin numbers?
I don't know about the spin numbers, but we had a fair amount of people that applied. Yeah, tier 1 providers, different companies that got used. I don't know how much I can say here.
Oh, fair enough. Thank you, though. Yeah, and it's. I think, yeah, larger districts, I think, get a little more attention, which is really unfortunate. And I wish there was a way we could find to incentivize that a little bit, but I don't think that we can. But we're just going to keep pushing it and getting more and more vendors out there, because eventually someone will get hungry and they'll start bidding on those little ones, and they're going to do some real good. Okay, so managed service for dark fiber, if you pay somebody to, obtain and install the modulating electronics and all of that, again, part of your TCO, so that you can show all of the associated costs and make sure that it's cost effective. Another thing, and this is more helpful than it is necessarily a rule, but you should always let service providers know that even if you have chosen to amortize the special construction, which is also a new part of that program, the district share, after discount, can be amortized for up to 4 years. You just have to negotiate the terms with your service provider. But if you indicate on your 470 that you want to amortize, some service providers might go, whoa, I can't wait 4 years for my money. I can't carry that kind of, capital investment. You can let them know that the discount share, right? So if you get an 80% discount on your special construction, 80% can be paid in that first year, all 80%. You can amortize your non-discount share, but you don't have to amortize the discount share. That's all up front. And so hopefully that will incentivize some, especially smaller vendors, to not be shy about bidding, because they are going to get paid a lot sooner than it might appear on the Form 470. So that's just something to keep in mind, really, to hopefully get vendors to respond better. I wanted to talk a little bit about how USAC has labeled the different parts of the different functions in fiber. Again, especially if you're with a consortium, some consortia are actually considering trying to file because they have so much extra time, and they have until July. But the line items that you use in the Form 470 for the line item dark fiber is what you would use if you want to lease dark fiber. Why they didn't put leased dark fiber there, I don't know. Lit fiber, leased lit, right? That one's relatively self-explanatory. Self-provision is fiber that you own. And then keeping in mind that part of that special construction includes the modulating electronics on either end of a dark fiber connection, you can apply for those as well, and they go under the other category. They were very thoughtful about how they set this up. So you want to make sure that your bid matrix, you might have a bid matrix that you use for your internet access or your voice services over and over, but you want to, before you file, you want to make sure that you've updated that so that it has the correct criteria to evaluate a bid like this. So you don't want to get in a situation where you've got all these bids and they're structured in a way that your bid matrix doesn't allow you to score them properly, because you can't remedy that at that point. Your bid matrix has to exist before you file the Form 470, so something to think about in your planning process. RFPs are required for fiber, and that includes the supporting documentation. So if you just want to give them a list of what you need and locations, addresses, things like that, that's fine. Or it can be a full-blown legal RFP, but something is required. And then a contract that results from fiber, and like I mentioned before, any E-rate procurement should have an exit clause that allows you to get out in case of funding failure. All right. So I talked a little bit about amortization, and again, if you want to amortize, that's something that you note on your Form 470. And also, if you're in a situation where you're not going to be able to do the project without amortization, and it's basically a requirement that the vendor that you choose is open to that amortization, you need to put that on your Form 470 and or RFP, because if you don't list that explicitly as a disqualifying factor, then you cannot use it as a disqualifying factor. So any disqualifying factor has to be explicitly listed in the form or in the associated RFP. So keep that in mind as well. And then, as I said a few minutes ago, the discounted portions paid up front, and that's, for most of us, hopefully, that's the lion's share of it. So that will make vendors happy. And be prepared to note the terms of your amortization in your Form 471, because they do ask. And I put a little example in here just to kind of help people wrap their brain around it. But I do want to note, there's a little note at the bottom, the USAC has not actually released any formal guidance yet on how we're going to actually invoice USAC for these charges. If you've been doing this for a while, you know you can either get a reimbursement after you pay, or you can get the vendor to discount your bills, and then they get the reimbursement from the feds. But in this case, especially if you're amortizing, you can't bill after you pay because you're not going to pay in full for 4 years. So the mechanism has not been explained to us yet. So this is a very high level kind of philosophical example of how this would work, but as soon as I get guidance on how to invoice, I will definitely let everybody know. But basically, we've got a $100,000 special construction with an 80% discount rate and a 2-year amortization. Once you negotiate the terms of that 2-year amortization, keeping it, again, 80% or $80,000 in this case can be paid to the service provider, you know, at the beginning or in that first year. I don't want to say before construction because I don't think that's the case at all. But it is that first year. So if they do the construction and then we have a billing mechanism in place, you can turn around and get that money back from USAC as soon as possible and get it to the vendor so they're happy. And then the 20% gets amortized over 2 years per the terms that you negotiated with your service provider, and everything, we all ride off into the sunset and everybody's happy. But again, like I said, kind of philosophical, not a lot of meat in there, and I apologize for that. I'm waiting patiently for that guidance. All right, purchasing modulating hardware. This is a quick one. Just want to kind of let everybody know. They are Category 1. Usually hardware is always Category 2, but when associated with a special construction project, modulating hardware is considered Category 1, which is awesome because we don't have to take it out of our Category 2 budgets. The hardware is basically whatever is at either end at the point of demarcation, right, that makes the fiber go, for lack of a better word. That doesn't include anything like internal switches, you know, that you're maybe connecting to internally. So once you cross that demarc, it becomes Category 2 again.
However, it does include the switch itself. So, you know, your layer 3 switch. So it's not just the optics, but it can be the layer
Thank
3
you.
switch itself. So,
Yeah, and it can be confusing.
you have dark fiber, or you're doing, let's say, even if you have, and the other thing to keep in mind is if you already have fiber, it doesn't have to be a new fiber project. Let's say your district already has fiber and you're doing a switching update, you can file the head-end layer 3 switches under Category 1, and then all your access layer switches and everything else under Category 2. So you can take advantage of this for existing fiber.
That's absolutely right. Thank you. Thank you very much. This is why I have people speak out, because that's super relevant right now. So for that hardware that he mentioned, again, like I said before, use the other category in the 471, and then it gives you a little space to describe what you're looking for, and so that, you know, you have the ability to kind of, you know, give some details. And again, if you currently own or are leasing the dark fiber, you can purchase the hardware to upgrade that as well with the same process. I'm sorry, that noise back.
Had to have placed that on your 470 previously under category 1?
Unfortunately, yeah.
Yes, you
that-
do.
yeah.
Yes. So that, yeah, it's definitely something to plan for. And then, yeah, I've already mentioned that it doesn't cut into your category 2 budget, so that's a really good deal. How are we doing on time? Okay, I think we're on the home stretch, guys. All right, so category 2 equipment funding. We have that set budget we talked about, and I was actually really surprised that this year I was still getting calls from districts who didn't understand how this works. And so that's why I wanted to kind of go over it real quickly again today. The budget is based on student enrollment times $150 per student. And that's what gives you basically your maximum spend under the program, right? It doesn't mean you can't buy other things. It's just you're not going to include them on an E-rate application. And then whatever your discount rate is for category 1, that is basically your discount for category 2, except if you're a 90% discount school. Then your category 2 discount is 85% instead of 90%. And really that was done just to kind of spread the money around a little bit more, okay? So I put a little example down there for the math, but basically the system will actually calculate all of this for you, and they did open up a category 2 budget tool that you can use to look and see what your budget is, but unfortunately it only works when you filed last year for category 2, right? So if you didn't file last year, it doesn't have any data for you. But if you go into EPIC and you finish all your NSLP, right, you do all of that data entry for all your schools, it will tell you on the discount screen what your rate is. And that'll give you an idea of how to calculate for planning purposes. And then hopefully next year, your data will get updated in the system. You know, there is a lot of discussion. So, right, the simple answer is that if your enrollment goes down, they do not reduce your budget, right? Which is great, because I was expecting the opposite to happen. And what's also kind of surprising is that if your enrollment goes up, you actually get those extra dollars. So if year 1, because remember this budget is only for this 5-year period starting last year. So this is year 2 of 5 years. And once you've spent that money, you're not going to get any more of it until the end of the 5 years, assuming that they continue this program. So if you, I was going somewhere with that. If you start out with, let's say, 100 students, and then the next year you go up to 110, then they give you that extra 10 students worth of budget. They tack it on to the second year. And then in the next year, the third year, if you go back down to 100, they do not make you pay the money back or anything like that. So it's actually, you know, kind of different from what I was expecting.
Can you talk about best way to handle, I've had some districts struggle with how to handle, let's say, I'm just going to use some simple math, their budget is $100. But what they're buying more than $100 worth of equipment, right? But the parts don't break out evenly at exactly $100, right? There's, $80 worth of equipment, and the next piece puts them at 110.
Right.
So I've had some districts feel like, well, I can't file for 110 because that's over my budget, and so they're leaving that $20 on the table. And then I've had other districts go ahead and file for the 110, and they get $100, and then the other 10 they have to pay. And so there's been some confusion about that.
Yeah. Thank you. That's a really good question. And I have talked about this in trainings before, but I'm glad to know that there is still confusion, because that means I can help address it. The short answer is, at the beginning of this, USAC said, don't put anything on your application that's beyond your budget, because it's going to slow down your review. And I have always said the exact opposite. because first of all, the FCC is not going to have any idea what the demand is unless we tell them. And the only way that we can tell them is through a Form 471. Secondly, let's say that you go out to and you do a contract, you've got your stuff all set up, and it's maybe a couple $100 over budget, right? You put everything on the application, and in the narrative you say, any overage will be paid out of, district general fund or whatever, right? Just so you're acknowledging to the reviewer that you are aware that you're over budget, right? But then let's say, it takes them 6 months to fund you, and in that time, there's a new model, right, of your hardware. And maybe that new model costs $20 less. All of a sudden, when you do your service substitution, you can afford all of it, right? So if you don't put it on the application, you absolutely can't fund it, right? So I always tell people, put it on your application, and the worst thing that's going to happen is they're going to call you or send you a letter and go, hey, did you know you were over budget? We're not going to approve beyond this amount. And you're going to go, okay, thanks, and you're going to be good to go. Okay? All right. I know we are short on time. Let's see. Okay, so on your Form 470, make sure to mark the boxes for maintenance and installation if needed, so you get appropriate quotes and you don't get shortchanged because installation is still covered. And keep in mind, too, that some pieces of equipment are only partially eligible because maybe they do more than one function, and one function's eligible and the other isn't. A lot of times your service provider will already know that because they've been working with USAC to determine the eligibility of the product, but sometimes they don't. And so that will usually, if you don't figure it out on your own, then a reviewer will look at it and say, well, we think that 10% of this cost is not eligible. And you'll say, okay, because it's hard to fight with them. All right, let's see. I know I've jumped around a bit. Oh, big important. ESDs and district offices do not have individual Category 2 budgets. I actually had more than one ESD ask me what their budget was, and I was really surprised by that. If you want to install hardware at an ESD or a district office, you absolutely can purchase it as Category 2, but the cost of it has to be allocated to the schools that the hardware touches, right? And it's especially important with ESDs that you communicate with your districts and your schools, because if you're going to apply for Category 2 funding and charge a school's budget, everybody in the chain needs to know, because that district could also be applying for that same money. And you could accidentally absorb a school's budget without them knowing it, right? So that communication is really, really critical. The cost allocation method is, like we said before, they don't tell us exactly how, it just has to be reasonable and quantifiable. Also keep in mind that Category 2 equipment has to be tracked, and the USAC has an example asset register, but you can create anything that you want as long as it has the key information. And that it's a best practice to label your hardware for what funding year you purchased it, what FRN you purchased it on, etc. Because then if you get audited and you have an on-site audit, they can come and easily tell, okay, this piece of hardware was purchased for this building and it is installed in this building, so it is correct, and no, you don't get an audit finding. You can dispose of equipment only in certain circumstances after a certain period of time. So after 3 years, you can transfer a piece of equipment to another eligible entity without penalty, but you cannot receive money or other kinds of trades for it. And if you have a school that closes, right, that equipment can also be moved, but you have to let USAC know. That way, if you run into an audit situation, they know where to look for that hardware. If they go to a school and see a piece of hardware there that's not supposed to be there, that could cause you some problems. And then if you have obsolete equipment or equipment that, you need to upgrade, you can dispose of it for money or not, but only after 5 years, right? So you don't have to notify USAC about that. After 5 years, they don't really care about the hardware anymore, okay? And actually, guys, that's it. Here's some contact information for us. And I don't know how this works, but I mean, I'd like to make this presentation available to everybody somehow. If you'd like, you can just email one of us and let us know that you'd like to have it, and we can just email it to you. That would be fine with me. We certainly could. Thank you. Yeah, great. Yeah, because I had some links in here that are some helpful resources. Thanks, everybody. Does anybody have any more questions? Yeah, sure.
Used the verbiage requires contract in category 2.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess I'm still a little unclear on what a contract is. Could a contract just be a simple quote? Can it be a proposal? Can it be a bid? We're talking about equipment.
Basically, the answer is, and I'm dealing with this with a district right now. The answer, according to USAC, is that it has to be considered a legally binding contract by state law. Okay? So if you have a quote, then the only way that quote would be considered binding, at least my understanding of procurement law, there would have to be some terms and conditions. Maybe like one district I know has their purchase orders have contract terms on the back. And it says right on it, when you sign this, you're agreeing to the terms, right? But, the answer is that it has to be considered by law valid.
If you use like the ORCAP program and you're using one of those existing state contracts, the contract already exists and your quote is just working off of that existing contract. Just so you know.
So this is Sabrina Carson. She's going to be around for the rest of the conference. If you see her,
Yeah. Yeah, you can.
and
Yeah.
her contact information is available. We got to get out of the room. So.
Okay.
So, hey, thanks a lot for coming, and how about a big round of applause for our speakers?